Imagine standing in a desert, 40 days without food, your body weakened, your stomach empty. And then, in your most vulnerable moment, a voice whispers, "Why suffer? You have the power. Turn these stones into bread." What would you do? This is not a story about resisting a meal. This is the moment when Jesus revealed the greatest secret about human existence, a secret that, once understood, changes everything about how you experience life itself. My friends, we gather here today not merely to discuss an ancient scripture, but to penetrate the living truth that Jesus demonstrated in that wilderness moment. When he said, "Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God," something happened in consciousness that reverberates through time into this very moment. Let us be still and contemplate what actually occurred. The nature of true hunger. Jesus had fasted 40 days. The body was making its demands known. And into that physical hunger came temptation in its most reasonable form. "If thou be the Son of God, command that these stones be made bread." Notice the subtlety here. The temptation was not to do something obviously wrong. It was to use spiritual power for material satisfaction. It was to let physical need determine spiritual action. It was to live from the outside in, rather than from the inside out. And what happened when Jesus refused? He didn't simply resist bread. He revealed a principle of existence that most of humanity has yet to discover. There is a hunger in you that bread can never satisfy. There is a substance that feeds consciousness itself. There is a life that transcends the biological organism. When you live by bread alone, and by bread, we mean all material things, all external circumstances, all physical conditions. You place yourself at the mercy of an ever-changing world. You become a beggar, forever dependent on what comes from outside yourself. Your peace depends on your bank account. Your joy depends on other people's opinions. Your security depends on circumstances you cannot control. This is not living. This is mere survival. The word is substance, but Jesus spoke of something else, every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. What is this word? Is it sentences in a book? Is it commandments on stone tablets? No, my friends. The word is the creative principle of the universe expressing itself. It is the divine idea. It is truth revealing itself in consciousness. It is the still small voice that speaks in silence. It is the presence of infinite intelligence and love at the center of your being. When Jesus said we live by this word, he meant that consciousness fed by spiritual realization is self-sustaining. It has its own supply. It has its own source. It is not dependent on external conditions because it draws from an infinite wellspring within. This is why the mystics of all ages have known periods of illumination where they needed neither food nor sleep, where they felt sustained by something beyond the physical. They were living by that word. They were drawing on a substance that the material senses cannot measure, but that consciousness knows as more real than bread. The great discovery. What happened when Jesus made this declaration? He discovered, or rather, he demonstrated that you are not merely a body requiring feeding. You are consciousness itself, and consciousness requires truth the way a body requires food. Think of your own experience. Have you not known moments when an idea illuminated your mind and you felt more nourished than by any meal? Have you not experienced times when understanding dawned and strength returned to you, though nothing in your external circumstances had changed? Have you not felt the presence of love or beauty or truth and known yourself to be more alive than when surrounded by material abundance? This is living by the word. This is drawing on inner resources. This is the self-sufficiency of spirit, the practical application. Now, someone might say, this is beautiful mysticism, but I still need to eat. I still have bills to pay. I still live in a material world. Yes, and so did Jesus. He didn't stop eating after the temptation. He didn't tell his disciples to abandon their nets and starve. He lived in the world, used material things, broke bread with his followers. But, and here is the crucial point, he was not dependent on them. He was not enslaved by them. He did not live by them alone. His consciousness was anchored in something deeper, something that no circumstance could touch. And because of this inner anchoring, something miraculous happened in his outer experience. Provision appeared, needs were met. The material world responded to his consciousness of spiritual abundance. 5 loaves fed 5,000 because one consciousness knew that supply is infinite. This is the great secret when you stop living by bread alone and begin to live by the word, by truth, by spiritual consciousness, by awareness of the infinite presence within you. Your relationship to the material world transforms. You use it, but it doesn't use you. You enjoy it, but you're not dependent on it. You work with it, but your life doesn't rise or fall with it. Your wilderness moment, each of you faces your own wilderness temptation. It comes in different forms, but the essence is the same. Will you live by bread alone, or will you discover the word that sustains consciousness? Perhaps your wilderness is financial difficulty, and the temptation is to compromise your integrity to obtain security. Perhaps it's loneliness, and the temptation is to accept relationships that diminish rather than enhance your soul. Perhaps it's fear of scarcity, and the temptation is to hoard, grasp, manipulate, control. In each case, you are being asked the same question Jesus faced: what is your source? What sustains you? What is the foundation of your existence? When you answer, bread alone, when you say that your life depends entirely on external circumstances, you condemn yourself to perpetual anxiety. The bread can always be taken away. The circumstances can always change. The material supply can always fail. But when you answer the word, when you discover that there is a consciousness within you fed by truth, by love, by infinite intelligence, you find an unshakable foundation. You discover a supply that cannot be depleted. You know a presence that circumstances cannot touch. The transformation of experience. What happened when Jesus said these words was not merely that he resisted temptation. A revelation occurred, a principle was demonstrated, a way of living was illuminated, and every person who has truly understood this teaching has experienced the same transformation. They have stopped being victims of circumstance and become expressions of consciousness. They have stopped begging from the world and started drawing from the infinite. They have stopped living in fear and started living in faith, not faith that things will work out, but faith that there is a presence and power within them greater than any circumstance they will ever face. This doesn't mean you stop eating bread. It means you stop worshipping it. It means you stop giving it power over your peace. It means you stop believing that your life consists of the abundance of things you possess. Instead, you begin each day knowing that you are sustained by something invisible, nourished by something intangible, supported by something infinite. You go about your human activities, but you do so from a consciousness of sufficiency rather than lack, abundance rather than limitation, wholeness rather than need. The invitation, my friends, the invitation before you today is the same one Jesus faced in the wilderness. Will you discover what truly sustains life? Not just biological life that continues automatically for a time regardless of your consciousness, but real life, abundant life, the life that is lived from the inside out, the life that knows itself as more than a temporary organism dependent on external supply, the life that is conscious of its source in the infinite. This discovery doesn't come through intellectual understanding alone, though understanding helps. It comes through practice. It comes through turning within daily and touching that place where the word is spoken. It comes through meditation, contemplation, the cultivation of inner stillness where you hear what cannot be heard with ears and know what cannot be known with the material senses. It comes through those moments when, instead of immediately reacting to circumstance, you pause and remember, I shall not live by this circumstance alone. I shall live by the truth that is speaking in my consciousness. I shall live by the word. What happened when Jesus said, "Man shall not live by bread alone"? The universe revealed its secret. You are more than you appear to be. You have access to infinite resources. You are sustained by something that circumstances cannot touch. You are consciousness itself. And consciousness fed by truth is self-sufficient. This is not just an ancient teaching. This is a present possibility. This is available to you now, in this moment, as you contemplate these words. Will you live by bread alone, always dependent, always anxious, always at the mercy of change? Or will you live by the word, discovering in your own consciousness that there is a presence, a power, a principle that is with you always, sustaining you, guiding you, making all things new? The wilderness awaits your answer. The stones are before you, and the word is speaking in the silence of your own heart. Let those who have ears to hear, hear. The temptation reveals true hunger. Jesus' response to Satan in the wilderness demonstrates that physical sustenance alone leaves the soul empty. Humanity's deepest hunger is spiritual. The word as living substance. Every word that proceeds from the mouth of God is not mere philosophy, but actual spiritual nourishment that sustains consciousness at a level bread cannot reach. Material dependency versus spiritual self-sufficiency. When we live by bread alone, we become slaves to circumstances. When we live by spirit, we find an inner supply that external conditions cannot diminish. The testing of consciousness, the wilderness experience, symbolizes those moments when material resources fail us, forcing us to discover whether we have cultivated an inner life or merely an outer existence. Transcendence through realization. Jesus didn't deny the body's need for bread. He revealed that consciousness fed by truth transforms even our material experience, making us whole rather than merely full. The temptation reveals true hunger. In that wilderness moment, 40 days into his fast, Jesus faced something far more profound than physical hunger. The temptation that came to him was not merely about bread. It was about the fundamental question of human existence. What truly sustains life? Satan's suggestion to turn stones into bread appeared reasonable, even compassionate. After all, the body was hungry. The stones were there. The power was available. Why not satisfy a legitimate need? But Jesus saw through the appearance to the principle underneath. He recognized that to live by bread alone, to make physical satisfaction the goal and measure of life, was to reduce human existence to mere biological survival. It was to place consciousness at the mercy of circumstances, to make happiness dependent on external conditions, to establish a pattern of living from the outside in rather than from the inside out. The deeper hunger Jesus identified was the hunger of consciousness itself. Every human being experiences this, though most cannot name it. It's the restlessness that remains even when the stomach is full. It's the emptiness that persists despite material abundance. It's the longing that no possession can satisfy, no achievement can fulfill, no relationship can completely fill. This is the soul's hunger for its source, consciousness seeking conscious contact with the infinite, the spirit within yearning for recognition and realization. When Jesus refused to turn stones into bread, he was not denying the body's legitimate needs. He was establishing a hierarchy of values, a recognition that man is more than flesh, life is more than metabolism, and existence is more than a series of physical satisfactions. He was declaring that there exists a substance, a nourishment, a reality that feeds something deeper than the stomach. It feeds consciousness itself, and when consciousness is truly fed, everything else falls into proper place and proportion. This temptation reveals to us our own condition. How often do we seek to satisfy spiritual hunger with material bread? How often do we try to fill the emptiness within with things from without? How often do we mistake the symptom for the disease, seeking more possessions, more experiences, more stimulation, when what we truly hunger for is meaning, purpose, connection with something infinite and eternal? The Word as living substance. When Jesus spoke of every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God, he was not referring to sentences in Scripture or commandments written on tablets. He was pointing to something far more dynamic and immediate, the creative principle of the universe expressing itself in consciousness. This word is not something you read, it is something you experience. It is not information, it is illumination. It is not concept, it is contact with reality itself. In the mystical understanding that Joel Goldsmith taught, the Word is the divine idea making itself known in individual consciousness. It is truth revealing itself. It is the infinite intelligence communicating its nature to the receptive soul. It is that moment of inner knowing when something clicks into place, when light dawns in the mind, when you suddenly see what you couldn't see before, understand what was previously mysterious, and know what no one had to teach you. This word is living substance. It actually nourishes consciousness the way bread nourishes the body. When a truth is realized, not merely believed or accepted intellectually, but actually realized in consciousness, something happens. Strength returns, peace descends, clarity emerges. The person who was confused finds direction. The person who was weak discovers inner fortitude. The person who is anxious knows sudden calm. This is not psychological, it is ontological. Something real has happened at the level of being itself. The mystics of all traditions have known this. They speak of being fed by silence, sustained by meditation, nourished by the presence of God. They describe periods of illumination when physical needs seemed to fade in importance, when they felt held and sustained by something that had nothing to do with material circumstances. They weren't hallucinating or deluded. They were experiencing what Jesus described, life sustained by the Word. This word proceeds continually from the mouth of God, which is to say, from infinite intelligence, from the creative source, from the divine principle that underlies all existence. It is always speaking, always available, always offering itself to consciousness. But it must be heard, it must be received, it must be recognized. This requires a different kind of attention than we normally employ. It requires interior listening, the cultivation of inner stillness, the practice of contemplation. When you begin to live by this word, you discover that you have access to a supply that circumstances cannot interrupt, a resource that the world did not give and therefore cannot take away, a foundation that remains stable regardless of external turbulence. This is not theory. This is demonstrable experience available to anyone willing to turn within and cultivate the consciousness that hears and receives the word. Material dependency versus spiritual self-sufficiency, the fundamental choice that Jesus presented in the wilderness is the same choice every human being faces daily. Will you live in dependency on external circumstances, or will you discover the self-sufficiency of spirit? This is not about whether you use material things. Of course you will. It is about whether material things use you. It is about where your consciousness is anchored, what your sense of security rests upon, what you believe ultimately sustains and maintains your existence. When consciousness lives by bread alone, it establishes a pattern of perpetual dependency. Your peace depends on your bank balance. Your joy depends on other people's behavior. Your security depends on circumstances you cannot fully control. Your sense of worth depends on achievements that can be lost. Your confidence depends on conditions that constantly change. This is not freedom. This is bondage. You have made yourself a prisoner of circumstance, a slave to externals, a victim of whatever changes the world brings. Consider how this plays out in daily experience. The person living by bread alone constantly checks external conditions to determine their internal state. Good news arrives, and they feel temporarily elated. Bad news comes, and they sink into anxiety. A compliment lifts them up. Criticism casts them down. Financial gain brings relief. Financial loss brings fear. Their entire emotional and spiritual life is at the mercy of an ever-changing world over which they have limited control. But spiritual self-sufficiency offers something entirely different. This does not mean isolation from the world or independence in the sense of needing nothing. It means discovering that at the core of your being there exists a source, a presence, a reality that external circumstances cannot touch. It means finding that there is something in you that remains when everything else is stripped away. It means knowing yourself as consciousness anchored in the infinite rather than as a body dependent on the finite. Jesus demonstrated this self-sufficiency throughout his ministry. He moved through favorable and unfavorable circumstances with equal poise. He was not elated by success nor devastated by opposition. He spoke with authority that came from within rather than from external validation. He possessed an inner calm that circumstances could not disturb. He had access to a supply that didn't depend on human goodwill or material resources. This wasn't because he was divine and you are not. It was because he had discovered what is true for all consciousness. The infinite is your source. When you begin to live from this realization, a profound shift occurs. You still engage with the material world, but you're no longer enslaved by it. You still work, plan, and use practical wisdom, but your fundamental sense of security rests on something deeper. You discover that there is a presence within you that can sustain you through any circumstance, guide you through any difficulty, and maintain you regardless of external conditions. This is not belief. This is the actual discovery of spiritual self-sufficiency, the testing of consciousness. The wilderness experience that Jesus endured is not merely a historical event that happened to one man 2,000 years ago. It is a universal pattern, a recurring theme in the spiritual development of every soul. The wilderness represents those moments when our material resources fail us, when our usual supports are removed, when we can no longer rely on external circumstances to sustain us. These are the moments that test whether we have cultivated an inner life or merely maintained an outer existence. Every person encounters their wilderness. It may come as financial crisis, when the resources you counted on disappear. It may come as health crisis, when the body you took for granted fails you. It may come as relational crisis, when the people you depended upon leave or betray you. It may come as existential crisis, when the meanings you lived by suddenly seem empty and the purposes you pursued seem meaningless. In each case, the same question arises: what sustains you when the bread fails? This testing is not punishment, it is opportunity. It is the universe's way of forcing us to discover whether we have anything more than bread to live by. When everything is going well, when circumstances are favorable, when resources are abundant, it's easy to believe we are spiritual. But the wilderness reveals what we actually rely upon. It strips away the superficial and shows us the foundation we've built upon. Have we built on rock or on sand? Have we cultivated inner resources or merely accumulated outer ones? The temptation in the wilderness always appears reasonable. Turn the stones to bread. Why not? Use your power to make yourself comfortable. Employ your abilities to escape the difficulty. Compromise your principles just this once to get through the crisis. The temptation is to abandon the inner work in favor of immediate outer relief, to trade spiritual development for material comfort, to live by bread alone because bread at least addresses the pressing need. But those who succumb to this temptation miss the very thing the wilderness was designed to reveal: the presence of a sustaining power within consciousness itself. They return to dependency on externals, having learned nothing from their crisis. They rebuild the same structure that collapsed, reinvest in the same securities that failed them, re-establish the same patterns that led to emptiness. Those who, like Jesus, refuse to live by bread alone, discover something extraordinary in the wilderness. They find that when material resources fail, spiritual resources emerge. They discover capacities they didn't know they had, wisdom they didn't realize they possessed, strength that comes from somewhere beyond the physical. They learn that consciousness sustained by truth can endure what the body alone cannot. They realize that there is indeed a word that proceeds from the mouth of God, and this word is sufficient for every need. My friends, we have journeyed together through the wilderness of consciousness, exploring what happened when Jesus said those transformative words: "Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God." Now we must ask ourselves the question that matters most: what will happen when you say these words? Not merely with your lips, but with your life. Not as quotation, but as realization. The choice before you is clear and immediate. It is not a choice you make once and forget. It is the choice you make in every moment of decision, in every circumstance of challenge, in every temptation to believe that your life depends entirely on what you can see, touch, and possess. Will you live by bread alone? Will you place your trust in the bank account that can be depleted, the job that can be lost, the relationships that can change, the body that will inevitably age? Will you anchor your consciousness in that which is temporary, changeable, uncertain? Will you remain a prisoner of circumstance, forever dependent on conditions beyond your control, perpetually anxious about what tomorrow might bring? Or will you discover what Jesus discovered in that wilderness, that there is a word, a presence, a power within you that no circumstance can touch, that consciousness fed by truth is self-sustaining, that you have access to infinite resources, that the source of your life is not outside you in the material world, but inside you in the realm of spirit? Go now into your life. Let the word feed your consciousness. Refuse to live by bread alone, and watch what happens not just in your circumstances, but in your very being, as you discover the truth that Jesus lived. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. This is not his truth alone. This is your truth. This is the truth of all consciousness. This is the secret of life itself. May you have the courage to live it. May you have the patience to practice it. May you have the faith to trust it. And may you discover, as countless others have discovered, that when you live by the word, everything, even your daily bread, becomes an expression of infinite abundance and unconditional love. The wilderness has spoken. The word has been given. The choice is yours. Let us close our eyes for a moment of silent recognition. In this silence, may you hear the word that is always speaking. May you know the presence that is always sustaining. May you realize the truth that is always true. You are more than bread. You are consciousness itself, eternally fed by the infinite source from which all life flows. Go in peace, live by the word, and be free.
Most people think they understand I am, but they're living from their human mind, identifying with their problems, their limitations, their past. This keeps them trapped in endless cycles of struggle and lack, never touching their true spiritual identity that exists beyond all human conditions. When Joel Goldsmith discovered the real meaning of I am, everything changed. He wasn't referring to your personality, your job, your circumstances. He was pointing to the divine consciousness that you actually are, the Christ presence within you right now, the same infinite awareness that creates worlds. The moment you stop identifying with your human conditions and recognize I am as God expressing through you, healing happens naturally. Your problems don't get solved. They dissolve because they were never real in spiritual truth. They were just shadows cast by false identification with the temporary. This isn't positive thinking or affirmations. This is recognizing what you have always been, but forgot. You are not a human seeking God. You are God consciousness experiencing itself as you. Feel this truth awakening in your awareness right now, dissolving every false belief about limitation. Joel discovered that most spiritual seekers make a critical error. They try to use I am statements to change their human experience, saying, I am healthy, or I am wealthy, while still believing they are separate from God, still trying to demonstrate something that would prove their worth or power. True understanding means recognizing that the I that says I am is not your personality. It's the same divine consciousness that spoke through Moses at the burning bush. It's the Christ awareness that Jesus knew as his true identity and yours, the eternal presence that has never been touched by any human experience. When you rest in this recognition, you're not trying to become spiritual or improve your human life. You're acknowledging what is already present. The infinite, perfect, complete nature of divine consciousness is your actual being, expressing itself as your individual existence in this moment. Practice this now. Instead of thinking I am sick or I am lacking, simply rest in the pure awareness of I am without adding anything to it. Let this divine consciousness be itself as you, without trying to change or improve anything about your human experience or circumstances. Joel taught that when you truly understand I am, you discover that there is no separation between you and the infinite source of all good. Every time you felt lack, fear, or limitation, you were believing in a lie about your true nature, accepting the illusion that you could be separate from wholeness. The divine I am that you are has never been sick, has never lacked anything, has never been afraid. These experiences happen to the false sense of identity, the personal self that believes it's separate from God. But this personal self is just a dream, a temporary appearance in consciousness that has no real existence. As you rest in the truth of I am, without any additions, without trying to be or become anything, you naturally begin to experience life from this divine perspective. Problems that seemed so real start to fade because you're no longer feeding them with your belief and attention. You're resting in what is eternally true. Joel called this the practice of the presence of God. You're not trying to bring God into your problems. You're recognizing that where you are, God is. What you are, in your deepest truth, is the very presence and power of the infinite, expressing itself as your unique individual existence right here and now. Here's what happens when this understanding becomes your living reality. You stop looking to the world to give you what you think you need. You stop trying to change people, circumstances, or conditions to make yourself feel better. You rest in the completeness that you already are as divine consciousness. Joel experienced this transformation when he stopped trying to heal his body and instead recognized that his true identity had never been sick. The body is just an appearance in consciousness, like a reflection in a mirror. When you change what's looking in the mirror, the reflection changes automatically without effort. This doesn't mean you ignore practical action when needed. It means you act from wholeness instead of from need. You give instead of seeking to get. You love instead of seeking to be loved. You serve instead of seeking to be served. This becomes natural when you know yourself as the source of what you seek. Right now, as you listen to these words, the infinite I am that you are is present and aware. It's not waiting for anything to change. It's not lacking anything. It's complete, perfect, and whole. Let yourself rest in this truth and watch how your entire experience of life begins to transform from the inside out. A woman came to one of Joel's classes completely broken by years of chronic illness. She had tried every medical treatment, every spiritual technique, every healing method she could find. Nothing worked because she was still believing that she, as a human being, needed to be healed by something outside herself. Joel looked at her with infinite compassion and said something that changed her life forever. You are not sick. The divine consciousness that you are has never been sick and can never be sick. Stop trying to heal what isn't real and rest in what you actually are. She felt something shift deep inside, a recognition beyond words. Within weeks, her symptoms began to fade, but more importantly, her entire relationship with life transformed. She stopped being a victim of circumstances and started living from the unshakable peace of knowing herself as divine consciousness. The healing of her body was just a natural byproduct of this deeper recognition. This wasn't a miracle in the sense of something supernatural happening. It was the natural result of aligning with truth. When you stop believing lies about your identity, the effects of those lies naturally disappear. You don't heal the illusion. You wake up from it and discover what was always real underneath. A businessman shared how understanding I am revolutionized his approach to success. For years, he had been driven by fear of failure, working endless hours, constantly stressed about money and competition. He was trying to get security from his business instead of bringing security to his business from his true identity. When he started each day by resting in the awareness, I am, without adding anything to it, something remarkable happened. He began to make decisions from peace instead of fear, from abundance instead of lack. His business didn't just improve financially, it became a source of joy and service rather than stress and struggle. Joel taught that when you know yourself as divine consciousness, you naturally express the qualities of the divine: infinite creativity, perfect timing, abundant supply, and harmonious relationships. You don't have to struggle to create these things. You simply have to stop blocking them with false beliefs about limitation. The same infinite intelligence that creates galaxies and coordinates the movement of planets is the I am that you are. When you rest in this truth, life becomes effortless, not because nothing challenging happens, but because you meet everything from the unshakable foundation of knowing who you really are beyond all appearances. Another student discovered the power of I am in her relationships. She had been married for 20 years, but it felt like she was living with a stranger. She was constantly trying to change her husband, feeling frustrated and unloved. Joel helped her see that she was looking for love instead of being love. When she stopped trying to get love from her husband and started expressing the love that she is as divine consciousness, everything changed. She stopped judging his behavior and started seeing him as the divine consciousness that he truly is, beneath all his human personality patterns and conditioning. Their relationship transformed not because he changed, but because she started relating to him from truth instead of from her wounded ego. She discovered that love isn't something you receive, it's something you are. When you know yourself as divine love expressing, you naturally bring healing and harmony to every relationship. Joel often said that all healing is actually the healing of the belief in separation. When you truly understand I am, you realize that there's only one consciousness appearing as many individuals. What you see in others is what you're seeing from within your own consciousness. Change your inner seeing, and everything changes. A mother shared how this understanding helped her with her teenage son who was struggling with addiction. Instead of being consumed by worry and constantly trying to control his behavior, she learned to rest in the truth that the divine consciousness expressing as her son was perfect and whole, regardless of his current behavior patterns. Every day she would quietly hold the awareness that the I am expressing as her son was the same divine presence expressing as herself. She stopped seeing him as a problem to be fixed and started seeing him as divine consciousness temporarily confused about its true identity, just as she had been before her awakening. Within months, something shifted in him. Without any pressure or intervention from her, he began making different choices. He started seeking help for his addiction and rebuilding his life. She realized that her peaceful awareness of his true divine nature had created a space for his own awakening to emerge naturally. This is the power of understanding I am, not just for yourself, but for everyone in your life. When you consistently see others as divine consciousness rather than as human problems, you create an atmosphere where healing and transformation can naturally occur without force or manipulation. If these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others find these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment. What healing journey resonated most with you? Joel taught a powerful practice to deepen your understanding of I am. Throughout your day, whenever you catch yourself saying, I am tired, I am worried, or I am confused, pause and ask, who is the I that claims to be these things? You'll discover that these conditions come and go, but the I am that observes them never changes. This practice reveals that you are the unchanging awareness in which all experiences appear and disappear. You are not your thoughts, emotions, or physical sensations. You are the divine consciousness that is aware of them, the eternal witness that remains untouched by any temporary experience or condition. As you deepen this recognition, you begin to live from what Joel called the consciousness of truth. Instead of being tossed around by changing circumstances, you rest in the stability of your true spiritual identity. Problems still may appear, but they don't disturb your fundamental peace and wholeness. Start practicing this today. Every time you notice yourself identifying with any limitation or problem, simply return to the pure awareness of I am and rest there. Don't try to change or fix anything. Just remember what you are beneath all appearances, and let that divine consciousness be itself as your experience. Another profound practice Joel shared involves recognizing I am in moments of gratitude and appreciation. When you see a beautiful sunset, feel love for someone, or experience any moment of joy, notice that the I am that experiences this beauty is the same divine consciousness that creates it. You are not separate from what you appreciate. This practice dissolves the illusion of separation between the observer and the observed. You begin to realize that the beauty you see in nature, the love you feel for others, and the peace you experience in meditation are all expressions of the one divine consciousness that you are, appearing as infinite variety and richness. Joel discovered that gratitude is actually recognition of your true identity. When you feel genuinely grateful, you're not a separate person receiving something from outside yourself. Your divine consciousness recognizing itself in all its expressions, appreciating the infinite creativity and perfection of its own being, appearing as your experience. Practice this awareness throughout your day. In every moment of appreciation, remember that what you're appreciating and the consciousness that appreciates are one divine reality. This recognition gradually dissolves the ego's sense of separation and reveals the unity that has always been your true nature and the nature of all existence. Joel emphasized the importance of understanding I am in relationship to supply and abundance. Most people believe they need to get things from the world to be happy and secure. But when you truly know yourself as divine consciousness, you realize that you are the source of everything you need, not separate from it. The divine I am that you are is infinite abundance itself. It's not rich or poor because it's the source of all supply. It doesn't lack anything because it's the fullness from which everything emerges. When you rest in this truth, you naturally attract and create what serves your highest good without struggle or manipulation. This doesn't mean money will fall from the sky or that you won't need to take practical action. It means you'll be guided to right action from a consciousness of abundance instead of lack. You'll serve others from overflow instead of need, and you'll find that life supports you in ways you never imagined possible. Begin to live from this understanding. Instead of worrying about how your needs will be met, rest in the knowing that the infinite source expressing as you is perfectly capable of providing everything necessary for your highest good and service. Trust this divine intelligence to guide you to right action and perfect supply. The most transformative aspect of understanding I Am is recognizing it in times of difficulty and challenge. Joel taught that problems are actually opportunities to deepen your realization of your true spiritual identity. When everything in the human experience seems to be falling apart, that's when your understanding becomes truly practical and powerful. In moments of crisis, instead of getting lost in fear or trying to mentally figure out solutions, you can rest in the truth that the divine consciousness that you are is never in crisis. It's the eternal presence that remains peaceful and whole regardless of what appears to be happening in the temporary world of form and experience. This practice requires courage and commitment, because the ego will insist that the problems are real and demand your full attention and worry. But as you consistently return to the awareness of your true identity, you discover an unshakable peace that doesn't depend on circumstances being a certain way. Joel often said that your problems are not your problems. They're opportunities to demonstrate the truth of your divine nature. When you meet challenges from the consciousness of I Am, solutions appear naturally, often in ways your human mind could never have imagined or planned. Trust this divine intelligence operating as your life. Many students ask Joel why the understanding of I Am sometimes seems to fade or why old patterns of thinking and reacting return. He taught that this is completely natural in the process of awakening. The ego, or false sense of separate self, has been in charge for so long that it takes time to establish new patterns of consciousness. The key is not to judge yourself when you forget your true identity or when you get caught up in human drama and problems. Instead, gently return to the awareness of I Am without making the forgetting mean anything about your spiritual progress or worthiness. Every return is a strengthening of your true understanding. Joel compared this process to learning to play a musical instrument. At first, you have to consciously think about every note and movement, but with practice, the music begins to play itself through you naturally and effortlessly. The same is true with living from the consciousness of your divine identity rather than your human personality. Be patient with yourself as this transformation unfolds. Some days the awareness of I Am will feel crystal clear and unshakable. Other days it may seem dim or distant. Both experiences are part of the natural process of awakening to truth. What matters is your willingness to keep returning to what you know is true about your spiritual identity. Another common challenge students face is dealing with people who are not interested in spiritual truth or who actively resist it. Joel taught that you cannot and should not try to convince anyone of spiritual truth. Your role is to embody the consciousness of I Am and let that divine presence work through you naturally without trying to change or convert anyone. When you truly rest in your divine identity, you become a healing presence wherever you go. People may not understand why they feel peaceful around you or why problems seem to resolve more easily in your presence, but they will be affected by the consciousness you're expressing, whether they realize it or not. The most powerful teaching is your own transformation. When others see the peace, joy, and freedom that comes from understanding your true spiritual nature, they may become curious about what has changed in you. Then you can share what you've discovered, not from a need to convince, but from a love that serves. Remember that everyone is at their perfect place in their spiritual journey. Your job is not to speed up their process or make them understand what you understand. Your job is to be so grounded in truth that you become a light in the world, naturally attracting those who are ready to awaken to their own divine nature. Joel addressed the question of physical healing directly. Many people wonder if understanding I Am means that all physical problems will disappear. He taught that healing happens at the level of consciousness first, and physical healing is often a natural byproduct, but the real healing is always the recognition of your true spiritual identity. Sometimes physical conditions improve dramatically when you stop identifying with them and rest in your divine nature. Sometimes they change gradually. Sometimes the body continues to have challenges, but your relationship to those challenges transforms completely. You're no longer a victim of circumstances, regardless of what appears to be happening physically. The healing that matters most is the healing of the belief that you are separate from wholeness, that you are at the mercy of conditions beyond your control, that you are powerless to change your experience. When these beliefs are healed through understanding your true identity, you become free regardless of external circumstances. Joel often said that the healthiest person is not necessarily the one without physical symptoms, but the one who knows their unshakable spiritual identity regardless of what appears to be happening to their body. This understanding brings a peace and freedom that no external condition can touch or disturb. The ultimate challenge in understanding I am is learning to live from this consciousness in practical daily life. It's one thing to feel connected to your divine nature during meditation or while reading spiritual books, but it's another thing entirely to remember this truth when you're stuck in traffic, dealing with difficult people, or facing financial pressure. Joel taught that this is where your understanding becomes authentic and powerful. Can you rest in the awareness of I am when your boss is criticizing you? Can you remember your divine identity when someone you love is suffering? Can you stay centered in truth when everything in your world seems to be falling apart? These challenging situations are not obstacles to your spiritual growth. They are the very opportunities through which your understanding deepens and becomes unshakable. Each time you successfully return to the consciousness of your true identity in the midst of human drama, you strengthen this awareness until it becomes your natural way of being. Start with small challenges and work your way up to bigger ones. Practice remembering I am during minor irritations and disappointments. As this becomes natural, you'll find yourself able to stay centered even during major life changes and crises. This is the practical fruition of spiritual understanding. If these challenge-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices, and comment. Which obstacle are you ready to transform now? A CEO shared how living from the understanding of I am revolutionized his leadership style and business results. Instead of leading from ego and the need to prove himself, he began leading from the consciousness of service and divine wisdom. His company culture transformed as employees felt the authentic power and peace he embodied. Decisions became easier because he was no longer attached to personal outcomes or worried about protecting his reputation. He could see situations more clearly because he wasn't looking through the filter of personal fear or ambition. The business prospered in ways that went far beyond financial success, becoming a place of genuine fulfillment and service. Joel taught that when you live from divine consciousness in any area of life, you naturally express the qualities that create success: clarity, creativity, integrity, compassion, and wisdom. These aren't things you have to work to develop. They're natural expressions of your true identity when it's not blocked by ego concerns and personal agendas. Whether you're leading a company, raising children, or serving in any capacity, the consciousness you bring to your role is what creates the real results. People feel whether you're coming from love or fear, from truth or ego, from service or self-interest. Living from I am naturally expresses the highest qualities in any situation. A doctor discovered how understanding I am enhanced her ability to truly heal patients. Instead of seeing herself as the healer and patients as broken people who needed fixing, she began to recognize the divine wholeness present in everyone, including herself. This shift in consciousness created an atmosphere where healing could occur more naturally and completely. Patients began responding better to treatments, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. They felt seen and honored in their wholeness, rather than judged and limited by their conditions. She found herself intuitively guided to the most effective treatments, and her presence alone seemed to have a healing effect that went beyond any medical intervention. Joel taught that all true healing occurs through the recognition of spiritual wholeness. Whether you're a doctor, therapist, teacher, or parent, when you see others as divine consciousness temporarily forgetting their true nature, you create space for their own remembering and healing to emerge. You become an agent of awakening rather than just problem solving. This doesn't replace practical skills and knowledge in your profession. It enhances them by bringing a deeper dimension of wisdom and compassion to your work. You serve from the overflow of your own spiritual understanding, naturally uplifting and healing everyone whose life you touch through your authentic presence and consciousness. A teacher shared how recognizing I am transformed her classroom and her students' learning experience. Instead of seeing struggling students as problems to be fixed or limitations to overcome, she began seeing each child as divine consciousness with unlimited potential, temporarily confused about their true capabilities and worth. Her classroom became a space of encouragement and possibility, rather than judgment and comparison. Students who had been labeled as learning disabled or behavior problems began to flourish as they felt genuinely seen and appreciated for who they truly were beneath their temporary challenges and conditioning patterns. Academic performance improved, but more importantly, students developed confidence, creativity, and joy in learning. They began to see themselves differently because their teacher consistently saw their divine potential rather than their human limitations. Her consciousness of truth became contagious, spreading throughout the school community. Joel taught that when you truly understand I am, you naturally see this same divine identity in everyone you meet. This recognition has transformative power because most people are starving to be seen for who they truly are, rather than for their problems, mistakes, or human personality patterns. Your consciousness of truth becomes a gift you give to the world. An artist discovered that understanding I am opened channels of creativity she had never experienced before. Instead of trying to create from her personal ego and the need for recognition or success, she began allowing divine consciousness to express itself through her art. The results were profound and surprising, even to her. Her artwork became more authentic and powerful because it wasn't filtered through personal agendas or the desire to please others. She was expressing from the infinite creativity that is the nature of divine consciousness itself. People were deeply moved by her work because they could sense the authenticity and spiritual power flowing through it. She stopped experiencing artist's block because she understood that creativity is not something she had to generate from her human mind. It's the natural expression of the divine consciousness that she is. When she rested in the awareness of I am, inspiration and creative energy flowed effortlessly through her. Joel taught that all true creativity comes from divine consciousness expressing itself through individual awareness. Whether you're an artist, writer, musician, or simply someone seeking to live more creatively, rest in your true identity and allow that infinite intelligence to express its unlimited creativity through your unique individual expression and gifts. The deepest transformation that comes from understanding I am is the end of the spiritual search itself. You realize that what you've been seeking has been what you are all along. You're not a human being having spiritual experiences. You're spiritual consciousness having a human experience, and there's nothing you need to achieve, attain, or become. This recognition brings profound peace because the restless seeking that has driven so much of human experience simply stops. You're no longer trying to get to some future state of enlightenment or spiritual achievement. You're resting in the completeness and perfection that you have always been, but simply hadn't recognized until now. Joel called this the end of the journey and the beginning of life. When you stop seeking to become spiritual and start living from the spirituality that you are, life becomes an expression of joy and service rather than a struggle to achieve or prove something. You're free to be authentically yourself without apology or explanation. This doesn't mean you stop growing or learning or serving. It means you do all of these things from wholeness rather than from need, from love rather than from fear, from the abundance of what you are rather than from the poverty of what you think you lack. This is true spiritual maturity and freedom. Living from the understanding of I am doesn't isolate you from the world or make you indifferent to human suffering. Instead, it makes you more compassionate and effective in your service because you're no longer trying to save or fix people from a sense of personal responsibility or guilt. You serve from the overflow of love that you are. You can hold space for others in their pain without being overwhelmed by it, because you know that their true spiritual identity is untouched by their current circumstances. You can offer practical help when appropriate without attachment to outcomes because you're serving from divine love rather than from personal need to make a difference. Joel taught that the most powerful service comes from being so established in your own truth that you become a healing presence wherever you go. People feel safe around you because you're not trying to change them or make them be different. You're simply being the love and peace that you are, and this naturally uplifts everyone. Your understanding of I am becomes a gift to the collective consciousness of humanity. Every person who awakens to their true spiritual identity helps create an atmosphere where awakening becomes easier for others. You're not just transforming your own life. You're contributing to the spiritual evolution of consciousness itself. The practical result of truly understanding I am is that you begin to live with what Joel called confident expectancy. You know that the divine intelligence expressing as your life is perfectly capable of handling any situation that arises, and you trust this intelligence completely, even when you can't see how things will work out from your human perspective. This confident expectancy is not blind optimism or positive thinking. It's based on the direct experience of your true spiritual identity and the recognition that this divine consciousness has infinite wisdom, power, and love available to express through your individual life experience. You expect good because you know yourself as the source of all good. Problems still arise, challenges still appear, but you meet them from a completely different consciousness. Instead of being victims of circumstances, you become conscious participants in the divine creativity that is always seeking to express greater harmony, beauty, and love through every situation, including the seemingly difficult ones. You discover that what appears to be your individual life is actually divine consciousness living itself. And you can trust this intelligence completely. You don't have to figure everything out with your human mind or control outcomes through your personal will. You can rest in the knowing that divine wisdom is expressing as your life experience. Joel's final teaching about I am is perhaps the most profound. When you truly understand this truth, you realize that these words are not pointing to something you need to understand intellectually, but to something you need to experience directly. The understanding comes through living from this consciousness, not from thinking about it. Every moment offers you the opportunity to choose. Will you live from the limited consciousness of the separate self, or will you rest in the unlimited awareness of your true divine identity? This choice is always available, regardless of what seems to be happening in your external circumstances or internal emotional states. The transformation that comes from truly understanding I am is not a one-time event, but an ongoing deepening into truth. Every day, every moment, every breath becomes an opportunity to remember who you really are and to live from that remembering. This is the most practical and powerful spiritual practice possible. As you go forward from this moment, carry with you the recognition that you are not separate from the source of all healing, all supply, all love, and all peace. You are that source expressing itself as your individual life. Rest in this truth, live from this truth, and watch as your entire experience of being human transforms into the joy of being divine consciousness in expression. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith secrets, like this video, subscribe for more transformative teachings, and comment, I am transformed, to confirm your new path. What if I told you that Joel Goldsmith discovered a spiritual truth so radical that religious institutions tried to suppress it? A revelation that could dissolve every limitation you face, but threatens the very foundation of traditional religious control? This isn't theory. This is the mystical Christianity secret that changed thousands of lives and made denominations deeply uncomfortable. The discovery was simple, yet revolutionary. God is not a power that acts upon circumstances. God is the consciousness that you already are. Not a distant deity dispensing rewards and punishments, but the infinite presence expressing as your very existence. This understanding demolishes the need for intermediaries, rituals, and institutional authority. Churches teach you to beg, plead, and petition an external God. Joel discovered that such prayer actually reinforces separation and powerlessness. The forbidden truth: you don't ask God for anything because there is no separation between the divine consciousness and your true identity. Recognition replaces petition. Realization replaces begging. This threatened everything denominations built their power upon: the belief that you need them to reach God, that salvation comes through their doctrine, that spiritual authority resides in their hierarchy. Joel's discovery liberated seekers from spiritual dependence. That's why they wanted it erased. Joel Goldsmith didn't start as a radical mystic. He began as a traditional practitioner who prayed in conventional ways, asking God to heal, provide, and intervene. Results were inconsistent. Something fundamental was missing in his understanding. Then came the breakthrough that religious authorities would later condemn as dangerous heresy. During deep meditation, he realized that petitionary prayer assumes God doesn't already know your need, that divine will must be convinced or changed. This places God in time and space, subject to persuasion. But infinite consciousness cannot be influenced because it already is all-knowing, ever-present perfection. The problem wasn't God's willingness, it was human perception. The forbidden discovery crystallized. Spiritual healing happens not by asking God to change circumstances, but by recognizing that God consciousness is already present as the only power and presence. Nothing needs fixing because nothing is actually broken in divine reality. Human sense perception creates the illusion of lack, disease, conflict. Joel tested this radical approach with a woman named Dorothy who suffered severe chronic pain for years. Instead of asking God to heal her, he silently recognized the truth. Divine consciousness knows no pain, disease, or limitation. Within weeks of her practicing this recognition daily, her symptoms dissolved, not because God intervened, but because she awakened to what was already true. Traditional religion teaches that God responds to human behavior. Pray correctly and receive blessings, sin, and face punishment. Joel's forbidden discovery demolished this transactional theology completely. Divine consciousness doesn't react to human actions because infinite being transcends cause and effect. God simply is, eternally and unchangeably perfect. This understanding transforms everything. When you stop asking God to act and start recognizing God as the only actor, as the consciousness that you are, miracles become natural. Not supernatural interventions, but the natural emergence of harmony when human misperception dissolves. Churches couldn't accept this because it eliminated their role as necessary mediators. The technique Joel taught was revolutionary in its simplicity. Sit quietly and recognize that infinite consciousness is present where you are, not hoping it will arrive, but acknowledging its eternal presence. Recognize that this consciousness knows no lack, no disease, no conflict. Rest in that recognition without asking for anything to change. This wasn't positive thinking or affirmation. It was recognition of spiritual reality that already exists, has always existed, regardless of human perception. Like opening your eyes in a bright room and recognizing light was there all along. You don't create it. You simply stop denying it. Here's why denominations tried to erase this discovery. It makes organized religion optional. If you can directly recognize divine consciousness as your own being, you don't need priests, pastors, or institutional doctrine. Salvation isn't something you obtain through church membership. It's the eternal truth of your spiritual identity. Joel faced fierce opposition from religious authorities who accused him of blasphemy, pantheism, denying the personal God. But his students were experiencing profound transformations through this simple recognition practice. Financial lack dissolving not through asking for money, but recognizing divine abundance as already present. Relationships healing through recognition of divine love as the only presence. The forbidden secret wasn't complicated mysticism requiring years of study. It was accessible to anyone willing to stop begging an external God and start recognizing the divine consciousness that you are. This democratized spirituality, removing power from institutional gatekeepers. That's what made it dangerous to religious establishments. Joel taught that you practice recognition for weeks and months, not expecting instant results, but gradually training consciousness to see truth instead of human appearances. Each recognition dissolves a layer of false perception. Transformation comes through persistent recognition, not through hoping God will eventually answer your prayers. Let me share what happened when Robert, a business owner drowning in debt, discovered Joel's forbidden approach. For years, he prayed desperately for financial rescue, asking God to send customers, open doors, provide opportunities. His business continued declining. Traditional prayer wasn't working because it reinforced his belief in lack as reality. Then Robert learned Joel's recognition technique. Instead of asking God to fix his finances, he spent 20 minutes each morning recognizing that divine consciousness knows no lack, that infinite abundance is the only reality. Not visualizing money or affirming prosperity, but simply acknowledging spiritual truth regardless of bank account appearances. The first 2 weeks nothing changed externally. Robert's mind fought the practice, insisting that recognizing abundance while bills piled up was denial of reality. But he persisted, understanding that he was training consciousness to see beyond human appearances. Recognition wasn't about changing circumstances, it was about awakening to truth. Within 6 weeks, unexpected opportunities emerged. Not because God finally answered prayers, but because Robert's consciousness shifted from lack belief to abundance recognition. Clients who had disappeared returned. New contracts appeared through unlikely connections. His business stabilized and began growing. The transformation came through consciousness change, not divine intervention. Amanda suffered from severe anxiety that medications barely controlled. She prayed constantly for God to take away her fear, grant her peace, calm her mind. The prayers seemed to bounce off heaven's ceiling. Traditional religious counseling offered no relief. Then she encountered Joel's forbidden discovery about recognition versus petition. Amanda learned to sit in silence and recognize that divine consciousness is peace itself, that perfect tranquility is the eternal nature of spiritual reality. Not asking for peace to arrive, but acknowledging peace as already present beneath the storm of human thoughts. This practice felt strange initially, like claiming sunshine during a hurricane. But Joel taught that you practice recognition, especially when appearances contradict it. That's how consciousness learns to see truth instead of human sense testimony. Amanda spent 15 minutes twice daily recognizing divine peace as present reality, regardless of anxious thoughts swirling through her mind. She didn't fight the anxiety or ask it to leave. Over 8 weeks, something shifted fundamentally. The anxiety didn't disappear instantly, but its grip weakened progressively. Amanda found herself responding to triggers with unexpected calmness. Not because she developed better coping mechanisms, but because consciousness was recognizing truth more consistently. Peace emerged naturally as recognition deepened. William and Michelle's marriage was collapsing after 22 years. Communication had deteriorated into hostile silence. They both prayed for God to fix their spouse, change attitudes, restore love. Traditional marriage counseling provided tools but no deep healing. The relationship seemed beyond repair. Then they discovered Joel's approach. Instead of asking God to change each other, they began recognizing that divine love is the only presence in their relationship. Not romantic feelings or emotional attachment, but the infinite love that is consciousness itself. This recognition practice required them to look past all human behavior and see spiritual truth. William practiced recognizing divine love as present even when Michelle criticized him. Michelle practiced recognizing divine harmony as reality even during arguments. They weren't pretending everything was fine or suppressing emotions. They were training consciousness to see beyond human conflict to spiritual truth that existed underneath. The transformation took 3 months of daily recognition practice. Gradually, something softened between them. Not because either changed their personality, but because both were seeing through different eyes. Recognition of divine love began dissolving the accumulated resentments. Their marriage didn't return to honeymoon romance, but found a deeper peace and respect based on spiritual recognition rather than emotional neediness. These stories reveal the power of Joel's forbidden discovery. When you stop asking God to act and start recognizing God as the only actor, as the consciousness that you are, transformation becomes natural. Not through divine intervention, but through consciousness awakening to eternal truth. The technique churches tried to suppress works because it addresses the root issue, misperception of reality. Human sense testimony tells you lack is real, disease is real, conflict is real. Recognition reveals these as false appearances, shadows that dissolve when light of truth shines. Joel taught this isn't instant manifestation or magical thinking. It's the patient work of training consciousness over weeks and months to recognize spiritual truth consistently. Each recognition session plants seeds that germinate gradually. Some days you'll see no evidence of progress. That's when recognition practice matters most. If these transformation stories inspire you to discover Joel's forbidden technique for yourself, like this video so more seekers can find these suppressed teachings. Subscribe for deeper mystical Christianity wisdom that churches won't teach. And comment, which recognition practice speaks to your situation right now? Beyond the basic recognition practice, Joel taught complementary techniques that enhance spiritual awakening. The first is what he called impersonalization, recognizing that what appears as human problem is actually impersonal false belief, not truth about any individual. This dissolves the tendency to personalize difficulties. When Daniel faced unexpected job loss, his first reaction was taking it personally. Something was wrong with him. He'd failed. He wasn't good enough. Joel's impersonalization technique taught him differently. Recognize that unemployment isn't personal truth about Daniel. It's impersonal appearance of lack belief in consciousness. Daniel practiced seeing the job loss as impersonal belief in limitation, not as truth about his identity or worth. This recognition lifted the emotional weight immediately. He wasn't a failure experiencing lack. He was consciousness witnessing false belief about limitation. Within this recognition, he could respond practically without psychological devastation. The impersonalization technique works with any challenge. Illness isn't personal affliction, it's impersonal belief in body as reality. Relationship conflict isn't personal attack, it's impersonal belief in separation. Financial struggle isn't personal inadequacy, it's impersonal belief in limited supply. Recognizing impersonal nature of problems transforms how consciousness responds. Joel's second complementary technique was the unconditioned mind practice. Traditional religion fills consciousness with conditions. If you're good enough, pray enough, believe correctly, then God will bless you. This conditioned thinking creates spiritual anxiety. Joel taught recognition of the unconditioned nature of divine being. Nicole struggled with perfectionism rooted in conditional religious teaching. She believed God's love depended on her spiritual performance. Joel's teaching shattered this. Divine consciousness has no conditions because infinity cannot be influenced. God's nature is unconditioned being, not reactionary blessing. Nicole practiced recognizing that divine love exists independent of her behavior, thoughts, or spiritual achievements. This wasn't license for irresponsibility, it was recognition of truth. She spent time daily acknowledging, divine consciousness simply is, requiring nothing from me, unchanged by my human actions. This recognition gradually dissolved her spiritual anxiety. She stopped performing for God's approval and began resting in eternal divine presence. Her spiritual practice shifted from earning favor to recognizing what already exists. Actions flowed from peace rather than fear. Relationships improved as she stopped projecting conditional love patterns onto others. The third technique Joel taught was recognition of supply as consciousness, not material accumulation. Traditional prosperity teaching focuses on getting more money, possessions, opportunities. Joel's forbidden approach recognized that abundance is the nature of consciousness itself, not dependent on external circumstances. Brian worked exhausting hours trying to create financial security. Despite success, anxiety persisted. There was never enough. Joel's teaching revealed why. He was seeking supply in form rather than recognizing supply as consciousness. Infinite abundance exists as spiritual reality, independent of bank accounts. Brian began practicing recognition that consciousness is supply, that divine intelligence is infinite resource expressing as all necessary form, not visualizing money or affirming wealth, but recognizing the omnipresence of divine abundance regardless of current financial appearances. This shifted his relationship with work completely. Within 4 months, Brian's income actually increased, but more importantly, his anxiety about money dissolved. He recognized abundance as consciousness truth rather than material accumulation goal. Work became expression of divine intelligence rather than desperate survival effort. Supply flowed naturally from consciousness recognition rather than human striving. Joel's fourth complementary technique addressed the deepest human fear: death. Traditional religion teaches death as reality requiring salvation. Joel's forbidden discovery revealed death as appearance, not truth of spiritual being. Consciousness is eternal, never born, never dying. This recognition dissolves existential fear. When Kevin's father received terminal diagnosis, the family was devastated. Kevin learned Joel's teaching. Recognize that life is consciousness, not physical form. Divine being knows no death because consciousness transcends material appearance. This wasn't denial of human experience, it was recognition of spiritual truth. Kevin practiced daily recognition that his father's true identity was eternal consciousness, not failing body. He recognized that life continues as consciousness regardless of form changes. This didn't prevent grief but transformed its nature. Kevin could support his father through transition without existential terror. His father, also practicing recognition in final months, experienced remarkable peace, not miraculous physical healing, but spiritual awakening to truth beyond form. When transition came, it was gentle passage rather than fearful ending. Kevin's recognition practice sustained him through loss because he knew consciousness as eternal reality. Now let's address realistic challenges you'll face practicing Joel's forbidden discovery. The first major obstacle is what Joel called taking thought, the mind's compulsion to analyze, plan, and control rather than rest in recognition. Traditional religion encourages mental activity, pray harder, understand better, figure out solutions. Stephanie began recognition practice with enthusiasm, but found her mind constantly interrupting. Instead of resting in divine presence, she'd start analyzing, am I doing this right? Why isn't it working? What should happen next? The mental activity blocked recognition completely. This is the most common obstacle. Joel taught that recognition requires releasing mental control. You're not trying to make something happen or understand how it works. You're simply acknowledging truth that already exists. When mind starts analyzing, gently return to recognition without judgment. The practice trains consciousness to rest rather than strive. Stephanie needed 6 weeks to quiet the mental commentary. Some days she'd spend entire sessions lost in thought, recognizing only in final moments. That's normal progress. Gradually, periods of pure recognition extended. The challenge wasn't failure, it was part of consciousness training. Patience with the process matters more than perfect execution. The second major challenge is expectation of immediate results. Modern culture conditions us for instant gratification. Joel's recognition practice works gradually, transforming consciousness layer by layer over weeks and months. When nothing changes quickly, disappointment and doubt arise. Jason practiced recognition for his business challenges, but expected dramatic results within days. When circumstances remained difficult after 2 weeks, he concluded the technique didn't work. This premature judgment aborted potential transformation. Joel warned against time-limited expectations. Divine consciousness operates outside human time. Recognition practice plants seeds in consciousness that germinate according to their own rhythm, not your preferred schedule. Some transformations emerge quickly, others require months of consistent practice. Judging effectiveness too soon blocks the very process that would eventually produce results. Jason resumed practice with different understanding. Recognition isn't bargaining with timeline, it's consciousness training regardless of apparent results. He committed to 3 months regardless of outcomes. Ironically, releasing expectation allowed transformation to unfold naturally. By month 2, significant changes emerged, but only because he'd stopped demanding immediate proof. The third challenge is practicing recognition while taking human action. Some misunderstand Joel's teaching as passive resignation. Just recognize truth and do nothing. But Joel taught that recognition informs action. It doesn't replace practical responsibility. The challenge is balancing spiritual recognition with human activity. Angela faced serious health issue requiring medical treatment. She worried that practicing recognition meant refusing medical help, that acknowledging divine perfection contradicted seeing doctors. This misunderstanding blocks many seekers. Joel taught that recognition and practical action aren't contradictory. Angela practiced recognizing divine wholeness as spiritual truth while simultaneously following medical protocol. Recognition didn't replace treatment, it transformed consciousness during treatment. She saw medical care as human tool consciousness could use while maintaining awareness of spiritual perfection as ultimate reality. This balanced approach allowed healing to unfold more effectively than either medical treatment alone or recognition without practical action. Consciousness remained rooted in spiritual truth while human form received necessary care. Joel taught that spiritual recognition enhances human activity by removing fear and resistance that block natural healing. The fourth challenge is maintaining recognition practice during crisis. Easy to recognize divine peace when life flows smoothly, difficult when chaos erupts. Traditional prayer feels more natural during emergency. Help me, fix this, intervene now. But crisis is exactly when recognition practice proves most powerful. Ryan faced sudden financial catastrophe when business partner embezzled funds. Every instinct screamed to panic, to beg God for rescue. Instead, he practiced Joel's teaching. Recognize divine consciousness as present power regardless of human circumstances. This felt almost impossible initially. But Joel taught that appearances of crisis are precisely when consciousness needs recognition most. Not to deny human experience, but to anchor awareness in spiritual truth beyond appearances. Ryan practiced recognizing divine intelligence as present, divine supply as reality, even while dealing practically with legal and financial consequences. The recognition practice didn't magically resolve the situation, but transformed how Ryan moved through it. Clarity emerged where panic would have clouded judgment. Solutions appeared that anxiety would have blocked. Within 8 months, he'd recovered financially and built stronger business. Recognition sustained him through storm by anchoring consciousness in truth beyond temporary chaos. If these challenge-breaking techniques resonate with your spiritual journey, like this video to help others discover freedom from religious conditioning, subscribe for advanced mystical practices churches suppress, and comment. Which obstacle do you face in recognition practice and how will you approach it differently now? Let's explore advanced integration of Joel's forbidden discovery in daily life. The real test isn't formal meditation sessions, but spontaneous recognition during ordinary moments. Matthew learned this during business negotiation that triggered intense anxiety. Instead of praying for successful outcome, he paused internally and recognized divine intelligence as present. This wasn't about controlling negotiation results or gaining advantage. Matthew recognized that consciousness expressing as all parties was divine intelligence, that conflict was appearance not truth, that harmony existed as spiritual reality regardless of human disagreement. The recognition lasted perhaps 30 seconds. Something shifted in the meeting atmosphere. Matthew's anxiety dissolved, allowing clearer thinking and more authentic communication. The negotiation didn't magically resolve in his favor, but concluded with unexpected mutual understanding. This demonstrated recognition's power in real-time application. Joel taught that brief moments of recognition throughout daily activity gradually transform consciousness more effectively than only formal meditation sessions. Each spontaneous recognition reinforces spiritual awareness. Over months, recognition becomes natural response rather than special practice. Consciousness begins seeing spiritual truth first, rather than reacting to human appearances automatically. Lisa discovered advanced recognition practice through relationship challenge with her adult daughter. Years of conflict created painful distance. Traditional prayer had asked God to change her daughter's attitude, soften her heart, restore their relationship. Nothing changed because the prayer reinforced separation belief. Joel's advanced teaching recognized that there's no separation in consciousness, that divine love is the only presence expressing as both individuals. Not hoping they'd reconcile, but acknowledging that spiritual reality already perfect harmony. This recognition practice felt radical while experiencing actual alienation. Lisa practiced recognizing divine unity as truth each time painful memory surfaced or new conflict occurred. She didn't suppress emotions or pretend everything was fine. She felt the human pain while simultaneously recognizing spiritual truth beyond it. This dual awareness characterizes advanced practice. Gradually, over 9 months, something transformed. Her daughter reached out unexpectedly. Conversations softened. Old resentments dissolved without dramatic confrontation. The healing emerged naturally from consciousness shift rather than behavioral negotiation. Lisa's consistent recognition had changed the consciousness in which relationship existed. Jonathan faced advanced challenge with chronic health condition that persisted despite recognition practice. He'd practiced for 6 months, recognizing divine wholeness, yet symptoms continued. This is where many abandon the path, concluding it doesn't work. Joel addressed this challenge directly in his advanced teachings. Some physical conditions resolve quickly through recognition. Others persist as consciousness works through deeper layers of false belief. The temptation is judging practice by physical results rather than by consciousness transformation occurring beneath surface. Jonathan's challenge was maintaining recognition without demanding physical proof. Joel taught that sometimes physical healing represents final stage of consciousness awakening that's happening throughout recognition practice. The real transformation occurs in how you relate to condition, with fear or with peace, with resistance or with acceptance, while recognizing spiritual truth. Jonathan continued recognition practice without attaching to physical outcome. Ironically, this surrender of demand for results created space for healing to emerge naturally. After 11 months total practice, symptoms began subsiding. But more importantly, Jonathan had transformed his consciousness around health, fear, and trust, regardless of physical condition. The most advanced application of Joel's forbidden discovery is recognizing divine consciousness present in those who appear as enemies or adversaries. Traditional religion teaches to pray for enemies, asking God to change them. Joel's advanced recognition acknowledges divine consciousness as the only presence, even in those who seem harmful. When Ashley faced a workplace situation with supervisor who seemed determined to undermine her, every human instinct wanted to fight back, defend, retaliate. Joel's advanced teaching required recognizing divine consciousness as expressing even as this difficult person, seeing beyond human behavior to spiritual identity. This wasn't condoning harmful behavior or accepting mistreatment. Ashley maintained appropriate boundaries and documentation while practicing recognition that spiritual truth about this supervisor was divine consciousness, not the hostile human behavior. This recognition transformed her internal experience completely. The external situation resolved gradually, as Ashley's consciousness no longer fed the conflict energy. The supervisor's behavior shifted not because Ashley prayed for change, but because consciousness in which interaction occurred had transformed through recognition. This advanced practice demonstrates ultimate freedom, recognizing divine presence everywhere, in everyone, regardless of appearances. As we enter final integration of Joel's forbidden discovery, recognize that you've received what denominations tried to erase: direct access to divine consciousness without institutional mediation. You don't need church approval, pastoral blessing, or denominational authority to practice recognition of spiritual truth. This is your liberation. The path forward requires consistent practice over months and years, not desperate seeking for quick fixes. Joel compared consciousness transformation to ocean tides: gradual, powerful, inevitable when aligned with spiritual principle. Each recognition session, whether dramatic or ordinary, contributes to consciousness awakening. You'll face days when recognition feels impossible, when human appearances overwhelm spiritual awareness. That's when practice matters most. Not judging yourself for struggling, but gently returning to recognition of truth beyond appearances. Consciousness learns through repetition, through patient, persistent recognition, regardless of temporary evidence. The forbidden discovery transforms life not by changing external circumstances, but by awakening consciousness to spiritual reality that was always present. Financial challenges, health issues, relationship conflicts don't disappear magically. They're met with consciousness rooted in divine truth rather than human fear. That shift changes everything. Joel Goldsmith left you a precious gift that religious institutions wanted hidden: the understanding that God is not a power acting upon your life, but the consciousness that you are. This recognition dissolves every limitation, because limitations exist only in false human perception, never in divine reality. The technique is simple but requires dedication. Sit quietly daily and recognize that infinite consciousness is present now, not later. Recognize that this consciousness knows no lack, no disease, no conflict, no death. Not hoping these will disappear, but acknowledging they're not truth about spiritual reality. Practice impersonalization. See challenges as impersonal false beliefs, not personal afflictions. Develop unconditioned consciousness. Recognize divine being requires nothing from you, depends on no human action. Recognize supply as consciousness, not material accumulation. These complementary practices deepen primary recognition. You'll encounter obstacles, mental activity, expectation of instant results, difficulty balancing recognition with action, maintaining practice during crisis. These aren't failures, they're part of consciousness training. Joel spent decades developing recognition consciousness. Give yourself weeks and months, not days. Transformation comes through patient, persistent practice. The advanced applications reveal recognition's true power: spontaneous awareness during daily challenges, relationship transformation through unity consciousness, healing that emerges from consciousness shift rather than desperate prayer, even recognizing divine presence in apparent enemies. These aren't special achievements, they're natural unfoldment of consistent practice. Some transformations will appear quickly, others require months or years. Physical healing may come last even while consciousness transformation happens throughout. Don't measure success by external results alone. The real victory is consciousness that remains rooted in spiritual truth, regardless of human appearances. Churches tried to erase this discovery because it threatens institutional power. When individuals recognize direct access to divine consciousness, religious authority becomes optional. Joel never intended to destroy organized religion, only to free seekers from dependence on external mediation for spiritual realization. Your practice honors Joel's courage in teaching what denominations condemned. Each recognition session validates that spiritual truth transcends institutional control. You're not rebelling against religion, you're awakening to mystical Christianity that existed before denominations created dogma and hierarchy. You now possess the forbidden knowledge that could transform your life completely. Recognition replaces petition, realization replaces begging. Consciousness awakening replaces hoping for divine intervention. God is not distant power you must convince, but infinite presence you recognize as your true identity. Begin today with 20 minutes of recognition practice. Sit quietly and acknowledge divine consciousness as present now. Recognize that this consciousness knows no limitation of any kind. Don't ask for anything to change, simply recognize truth that already exists. Practice this daily for 3 months minimum. When challenges arise, practice spontaneous recognition. Brief pause to acknowledge divine presence regardless of appearances. When relationships conflict, recognize unity beneath apparent separation. When health falters, recognize divine wholeness as spiritual truth. When finances struggle, recognize consciousness as infinite supply. The denominations that tried to erase Joel's discovery feared your liberation from spiritual dependence. They wanted you believing salvation comes through their authority. Joel revealed that salvation is recognizing the divine consciousness you already are. This recognition practice is your freedom. If Joel Goldsmith's forbidden discovery has illuminated your spiritual path today, like this video so this suppressed wisdom reaches others ready for transformation. Subscribe to continue receiving mystical Christianity, secrets churches won't teach, and comment, "I recognize divine consciousness," to confirm your commitment to this liberating practice.